Deputy Catherine Connolly, please.
Well, Taoiseach, my question today relates to child protection and the ongoing inadequacies in that area. We cannot reassure ourselves that children are protected. You're aware, of course, that following a leak last week, the National Review Panel report was published yesterday, following a leak. Coincidentally, on the same day, a report from HIQA confirmed ongoing inadequacies in relation to child protection. Now, the summary report is dated December the 18th. I understand it was completed since the end of November. The clear question is, why did it take so long to publish it, and why did it have to be leaked? In relation to the report itself, it acknowledges the grave and heinous sexual abuse perpetrated on the 3 children while they were in the care of the state. They refer to serious errors of judgment, flawed assessment and decision-making, and lack of management oversight. The report found that sufficient evidence existed at the time to indicate that the children should be moved. The measures taken by the social worker department were deficient, to say the least, and there's a whole list of the deficiencies. A safety plan that was put in place but really not implemented and rarely referred to in subsequent meetings. My time is limited, Taoiseach. I won't go on. I would ask you, have you read the report? What are you going to do about it? In relation to the terms of reference of that report, I have serious concerns as to how this was done from day one. The final disclosure was in 2011. The National Review Panel got its referral in April 16. We're now in May 19. There was a slight delay, it would appear, because somebody somewhere asked them to delay it. The times aren't given nor who asked. And on top of that, there was no publication date. Yesterday I raised it with the Minister. She told me it was always going to be yesterday. Significantly, over the course of a year, in a whole series of questions asking when this would be published, I got no indication that it would be yesterday. So here we are in Dáil. The most grave and heinous sexual abuse. The response from TUSLA, I have to say, is not reassuring when they refer to a point in time, because that point in time is ongoing. The report yesterday from HIQA, coincidentally published on the same day, they looked at 6 national standards and they assessed the operation of foster homes in 3 counties under those headings. 4 were non-compliant. 1 was majorly non-compliant in relation to child protection. The very issues in relation to safety plans are ongoing, and a number of all of the other issues identified, plus an absence of staff, plus a number of children who don't have a social worker. So Taoiseach, if you could answer me without jargon, without a reply from whoever writes the speeches, and tell me in the first instance what is your response to that summary report, and then confirm for me what actions this government is going to take, and explain to me how this report did not come back to a minister, given the serious nature of this, and back into this Dáil for discussion, so that we could all take comfort from the reassurance that children are protected. Thank you.
Taoiseach.
Thanks, Deputy. The report of the National Review Panel was published yesterday, I believe. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I do have it, and I'll certainly read it before the end of the week. These terrible, tragic and appalling events which befell these young women are almost unspeakable and hard for us to even think about or speak about as human beings. They are events, though, that occurred in 2007 and the period before that, and a lot has happened when it comes to child protection since then. Child protection was not much of a priority for previous governments. In fairness to my predecessor, Enda Kenny, he made it a priority by establishing a dedicated Department for Children and Youth Affairs, by taking TUSLA out of the HSE and establishing it as a standalone agency when it used to be a bit of an afterthought in previous times. So a lot has been done since then. TUSLA established as a standalone agency separate from the HSE, a Department of Children and Youth Affairs carved out from health and given full cabinet status. We've had a children's rights referendum, and we've acted on that with meaningful legislation and mandatory reporting brought in not too long ago, so that people have to report child abuse when it occurs, and that wasn't the case in the past. And when it comes to, for example, foster care, and at the heart of this is a foster care case, In that region, for example, at the time, there were only 3 social workers looking after the kids in foster care in that region. Since then, resources have been increased fivefold, by 500%, and there are now 15 social workers working with foster care families in that region and making sure that everyone is assigned to a social worker if they're in foster care. So a lot of progress has been made on child protection in recent years, spearheaded by Ministers Apone, Minister Flanagan and now MEP Fitzgerald before that. But there's always more that needs to be done, and we totally acknowledge that. And that's why the recommendations of this report will be taken very seriously and will be responded to.
I'm not one bit reassured by your answer. It is not a point in time. It didn't finish in 2007. It took till 2011 for a second child who had been regularly raped to come forward. The first child's allegation was deemed credible. The second child's allegation was deemed credible. Yesterday, Taoiseach, and I know you're a busy man, but the report from HIQA in relation to Sligo, Leitrim, West Cavan confirmed that there are ongoing issues in relation to child protection. Perhaps somebody could read it for you and to point out the facts that the safety plan issue is still a problem, allocation of social workers is still a problem, and so on. In relation to the review itself, at the time, the system, the social workers and management failed to comply with their statutory obligations at the time. They continuously failed to comply with their statutory obligations on a repeated basis over that. And nobody, Taoiseach, if you might just listen, nobody has considered talking to the children that were in that family before these courageous children came forward and made their complaints. Did it occur to any of you that you might look at the children that were there before to see if they were subjected to the same abuse? In terms of reference, has it occurred to the government to actually look at this and say, how could a report of this significance take so long? How could a report and referral go in April 16 and we're talking about it in May 19 as a result of a leak to RTE, and they deserve congratulations from us if that's an appropriate word. It was their programme that led to the referral in the first place, not Tussla. And finally, Taoiseach, you might look at Charlton and you might look at other HIQA reports which said Tussla is incapable of holding a mirror up for reflection. And they also pointed out, I think, Charlton, that said criminal prosecution should never, ever be used as an excuse when there's a failure in relation to child protection.
Deputy, please.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Taoiseach.
Thanks, Deputy. I'm advised that the reviewers concluded that it was unlikely that the abuse could have been uncovered prior to the disclosures. Once the abuse was disclosed in 2007, there was sufficient evidence for the long-term foster children to have been removed from the family. This didn't happen. It should have happened, and the report calls out some poor decision-making in that regard. No abuse was found to have occurred after 2007. However, the reviewers highlighted that the safety plan was not effective, and the main weaknesses related to the flaws in the management of the case. The complexity and seriousness of the credible allegations should have generated a high-level, coordinated and persistent response, and the report refers to the prevalence of groupthink as a factor. The report is clear that social workers in the area were committed and often went above and beyond their brief to provide support. The recommendations of the report are being closely examined, and a number are already being implemented. Changes have been made since 2007. Indeed, these events happened 7 years before TUSLA was established, and I outlined in my previous reply what's happened since then. It is important to be mindful, and I'd ask the House to pay attention to this, that a number of the young people involved in this case may still be extremely vulnerable. The past hurt and current well-being of all young women are a real concern. While one of the young people in this case has chosen to waive their anonymity, the others have not. And there is legal protection for witnesses in such cases, and it's understood that this remains in place with regard to the other women involved. And the summary report is understood not to compromise this legally protected anonymity, and we need to make sure that none of us do that.